Hey, I'm Dr. Julia DeGangi, a neuropsychologist and myself a parent, here to talk to you today about parenting. So, as a neuropsychologist, I help families figure out some of the most painful circumstances that can befall a family. And I'm also a mother of two young kids. And so I know firsthand how amazing and how challenging raising children can be. I think a lot about this phrase that I call the radiant agony of parenting. And what that means is really it comes down to a question of how do we bear the unbearable brightness of what it means to make and shape a human life? To answer that question, I think we have to get really clear on what does it mean to parent? Like, what are we working with here? So, the parent child relationship is the strongest, the most powerful relationship on the planet. So, to contrast that, the relationship between long-term adult romantic partners is the most complex relationship on the planet, and the relationship between parent and child is the most powerful. So, the scientific literature is rife with evidence of this power, right? Both from human and animal studies. Just to give you one quick example. So, if you take a very young baby and you put them on this optical illusion that's like a visual cliff, the baby's like, sucker, I see that that's a cliff and I will not plunge to my death. No, gracias. Okay. You put the mother on the other side of that cliff, and the mother's like, the kid is willing to risk death, right? So that bond is so strong, that trust is so strong that it will override those biological impulses where just moments ago the kid was like, I ain't doing that. Okay. So I think what this is telling us, we're all interested in having a life that matters. In our own lives, we have desires and needs, and I think everyone wants a life of value and everyone wants a life of influence. Because of the bond between the parent and the child, nowhere is our opportunity for influence, nowhere is our opportunity for power, and nowhere is our opportunity for respect greater than it is in that dynamic. I think about parenting, the lens that I think is the most useful is a leadership lens. Okay, so I think about parenting through the lens of leadership. And what I have come to realize is that how we lead our children has everything to do with our personal power in every other aspect of our life. In other words, how I show up as a parent totally influences how I show up as a spouse, how I show up as a business leader, how I show up as a member of my community. There is nothing as humbling. There is nothing that is times that requires profound amounts of emotional intelligence like the rearing of our own small children. So if I ever, God forbid, have a 10-minute blurb of when I'm like, I'm actually kind of emotionally mature, I'm actually kind of enlightened, allow me to spend 20 minutes with my children past bedtime and I'm like on my knees chanting like Om Shanti, serenity now. Okay. So what I want to sort of talk about is how can we carry such a profound responsibility, and how can we carry it with pleasure and with playfulness, right? So it's absolutely profound, but how can it be something that we carry with grace and enjoyment? And to do this, I think that we need to tell the truth. And part of the truth of parenting is there's a hard truth of parenting and there's an easy truth of parenting. So everything in our life is a dichotomy. Everything in the world speaks to us in twos. The dawn and the dusk, the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the big and the small. In parenting, there is the easy, beautiful, adorable truth. These are the moments that are cuddly, that fill your body with snuggly warmth, the giggles, the hilarity. Okay, so for example, today we went out for dinner and I was wearing this green khaki jumpsuit and I was pretty convinced that I looked like a Power Ranger goddess. And my little 4-year-old looked at me and she was like, Mom, I like your outfit, but not a lot. I was like, oh, okay. So you don't really like my outfit? She was like, I don't like it a lot. I don't even like it medium. I like it a little. I was like, all right. Okay. So my husband was like cracking up. So super funny, super adorable moments. But there are the hard truths of parenting that we do not discuss. And I didn't realize the degree to which we do not discuss them until I was tasked with the rearing of my own children. So I think that there is plenty of pain involved in parenting. So nothing has tested the limits of my emotional intelligence. Nothing has tested the limits of my own ability to emotionally regulate. Nothing has tested my patience. Nothing has tested my desire for commitment. Nothing has tested my own understanding of my own importance more than the rearing of my own small children. When I had my first child, I was totally struck by how the truth narrative only talks about the easy, the bright, the beautiful. Okay. So I got all of these amazing cards, I got all these amazing candles. And I was like, no, I am not feeling the vibe of I can never for one single second bear to take my eyes off this loving beacon of 9 pounds of light. I was like, where can I find the advice about whether it is legal to sign divorce papers in breast milk and tears? Okay. Or I'm sorry, when am I going to get a candle that's called things like baby powder, lavender, and misery? So I just started to feel very early on that when we tell the story about parenting, that never miss a moment, enjoy it, treasure every single moment, it felt so untethered from what I had been treating in clinic for many, many years, and then what I was living in my own body. So, first of all, that's why if it was all so amazing, if it was all so amazing all the time, there would not be a wild market of parenting advice out there. And there is tons and tons and tons of, if it was so easy and glorious and you wanted to treasure every moment, no one's like, oh, do you want me to tell you how to really enjoy a root beer float? So you're going to just love the root beer float and you're going to savor the root beer float and you're not going to, it's like you just drink the root beer float because it's just good. Okay. So there's a lot of parenting advice out there. But my problem with the parenting advice is it centers the child and not the parent at the expense of the relationship between the two. So here's what I mean by this. I, as the parent, am easily, clearly, self-evidently the most powerful person in the dynamic, right? You, as the parent, provide the context for the relationship. It is your leadership that sets the tone for how the relationship will go. Okay. And so the question then is like, so much of the parenting advice is how much independence do we need to give our children? How much dependence? How much attention versus non-attention? When should they try things on their own? When shouldn't they? Is this, when should they be using video games? Is this right for their development? Is that right for their development? But I think the better questions, if I am the context for the whole relationship, is where do I get triggered? Why do I get activated? And where specifically do I reach the edge of my tolerance? It is the edge of tolerance that determines when the relationship is still in a safe, protected, flexible, graceful state, and when it flips into something not healthy. Okay? People can only do what they can tolerate. People can only do what they can tolerate. So, what can we tolerate? So, now I want to talk to you about something that I call the master pattern. Okay? What is the master pattern? The master pattern is coding that we all hold inside of us that is very old. It dates back to our own childhood. Every single person has it. For a lot of us, it's not very conscious, but it is a pattern that tells us exactly what we will tolerate and exactly what we will not tolerate. This is why you can see plenty of people, for example, in two-person marriages and four-person families or five-person families or single households. And even though there's quite only a finite number of those, the iterations of how those things actually play out, what people allow, what they don't allow, what they get upset by, what they don't, is infinite. Okay. So our master pattern tells us how the world is supposed to unfold. So, a very important thing to understand about your brain and therefore your life is we sacrifice our entire lives not on an altar of possibility, not on an altar of dreams, not on an altar of happiness. We sacrifice our lives on an altar of familiarity. And the thing that tells us if it is familiar or not familiar is the master pattern. Okay, what is the master pattern? The quickest, easiest way to think about the master pattern is what I call a bumper sticker identity. So we all have a bumper sticker identity, and examples of these could be something like I am the achiever, I am the caretaker, I am the fixer, I am the peacemaker, I am the martyr, I am the skeptic. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on, right? And it's very simple, and it's simple because it was developed in childhood, and that was the cognitive complexity of the child. It plays out in incredibly profound ways in our life. So I'm going to tell you just a really quick story that has stayed with me for a long time. So many years ago, I treated a man who was suffering from being a pretty extreme perfectionist. And one of the things that we came to realize in our work together was one of the great traumas of his life was when his parents got divorced. And he said that the day his parents told him that he was about 6 years old. My child just turned 6 on Saturday, so the story feels extra for me to tell tonight. That on that day, an hour or so before, his parents sat him down to tell him that the family, as he knew it, was ending. He had spilled milk at the kitchen table. And his parents, who were very, very frazzled because they were about to have this devastating, traumatic conversation with the child, the father reacted. Probably just yelled like, "Oh, don't spill the milk." 30 minutes later, his parents tell him, "We're ending this thing." At that moment, unbeknownst to his parents would have felt terrible. He makes the child connection that because he spilled the milk, his family is ending. So he thought, oh my God, this is a traumatic catastrophe. Never again will this happen. So I will ensure that there are no more accidents and that I am perfect. So he now embodies the master pattern of I am the perfectionist. So, let's just look at a couple. You can tell me if any of these resonate with you, but let's say you are the caretaker. Well, there's an upside and a downside to all of these identities or all of these master patterns. So a caretaker is warm. They're, pretty emotionally, can be very emotionally intelligent. They're compassionate. And the downside or the dark side is like, I will help the living shit out of you. Okay. What's that? You want a glass of water and you're standing right there with your head underneath the faucet, and go ahead and sit down and I will get up and get you the cup and bring it to you. Right. And then this creates this pattern of like, I am exhausted. I'm always working in service of others. I'm never appreciated, but yet I need to continue to do this because if I don't caretake, well, I can't be out of alignment with my own identity, right? Or the boss is another core master pattern, a bumper sticker identity. The upside of being the boss is these people are very strong. They oftentimes have a great vision. But the tension here in the parenting can come where it's like, oh, yes, yes, I definitely want to raise independent, courageous adults who will go on to speak truth and blow whistles at wrongs that they see. And the parent truly wants this, but they can't tolerate the tension when the child does something that challenges that identity. And so it comes out like, oh, I'm sorry, Missy. Don't you talk that way to me, right? Don't you second guess me. It's going to be my way or it's going to be the highway. So it becomes this very command and control. And if the child makes any natural, what's very biological and natural for the child, increases in their own autonomy, the parent can see that as very threatening, a challenge to their identity. I am in charge here. Okay. The thinker, this is another core identity. And the thinker is like very logical. So they have gotten through life. They are oftentimes, like engineers, accountants. They're very logical. They can be very intelligent. So they have a child and they're like, it's not logical that you are not adhering to the schedule. It says here that you will sleep for 8 consecutive hours by the age of 12 weeks old. And it is not logical that you are crying so much. It's not logical that you are crying so much, right? So for the thinker, being in this, first of all, raising children is incredibly emotional. Again, it tests us at our emotional limits more than anything. So for the thinker, that can be very taxing. So I'm just going to end here by saying that you are the context. You are the context. And the deepest context for your entire relationship between you and your child is your master pattern. And so if you want to make the most seismic, the most transformational, the most powerful shifts in the quality of your relationship and the connection and the flexibility, I would strongly encourage you to begin at ground zero. And ground zero is with your master pattern. Thanks so much for listening.